if you said, would you ever do it again? Of course I would. And it would be painful, but I know that what the outcome would be. It's just like people ask me all the time, would you ever go back to Iraq? And I also say, yeah, in a heartbeat. I don't know, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment or something. I have no idea. But it gives you a sense of you're a part of something. Mm-hmm. And that's bigger than you.
Welcome back to the Mind Change Podcast. I'm your host, Heather McKean, and today we have an episode that I'm super excited about. We're going to be speaking with someone who is really coming to mind change from the perspective of a veteran with experience with PTSD. And so I would like for you to please help me welcome Ray Collins to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Ray. It's good to see you again.
You too.
So I'm going to let you, if it's okay, to just maybe give us a little background of who you are, and then we'll get into a little bit of how you came into Mind Change.
Well, I'm Ray. Mostly grew up in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And at the age of 18, I joined the U.S. Army, and I was in for a little over 8 years. Yep.
And how was that experience for you?
It was a journey, big adventure.
Big adventure, probably in many ways.
Yeah.
I also was in the Army, so have very little in common with your journey. Okay. But yeah, some of that shared kind of experience with the Army. There's a lot of good about it.
Oh, well, yeah.
So
tremendous amount of good. But, with that comes also difficulty in coping with stress and trauma, and especially if you get deployed overseas during wartime, which I was when it began in Iraq in early 2002, and we didn't end up leaving until I believe it was after 2004.
So 2 years, yeah. Pretty much solid of pretty significant battle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then maybe you can explain how we ended up knowing each other and getting involved in any of the mind change sphere.
All right. So my wife had this idea from her cousin Kara, who you know, mm-hmm. And so she said she was going to what I thought was a wellness convention, which I try to listen all the time, but sometimes things slip by me. So that's what I perceived it as. So when people ask me, I'm like, I don't know. They're like, where are you going this weekend? I'm like, I don't know. Wellness at convention? I don't know. So I was just, because she was on this journey herself of healing and for medical reasons. And so she said, do you want to come with me? Internally, no. But of course, I'm going to go with her. And I am very glad I went. Even though I was dragged the whole way. So
yes. Yeah. Which, hey, some people get drug into this, yeah. Right? Yeah. Because I would assume, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been through so many things. You've tried so many things. You've been to lots of different, maybe therapy avenues and modalities. And, so I know that journey too. That gets like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go to another thing, listen to another thing, do another thing, when maybe I'm still going to feel just as rotten as I did. And there's little things that help here and there, but yeah. So what you ended up coming to, not a wellness convention, but our grief and loss seminar that we were doing in Washington, D.C. at the time. Mm. And I remember, so of course I didn't know anything about you. We had quite a few people there. The way I first became aware of you at all was I heard your dog. I heard a dog during the...
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. I was like, I'm hearing a dog. And as a dog person, I'm like looking for a dog as I'm trying to speak to the audience.
Yeah.
And so you had a service animal there, right?
Yep. Yep. He's a good boy. His name's Luca. He's a German Shepherd. And I adopted him from my father. My father retired. He retired from the jail. He was a social worker, caseworker, and he was 100% blind due to a car accident back in '86. So he retired from the jail, and Luca was only 5 at the time. And they usually take the dog and retrain them for another blind person, which I was all for. But I tried to adopt myself because I was diagnosed with a seizure disorder due to several TBIs I suffered in Iraq from explosions.
TBI being, for anyone who doesn't know, traumatic brain injury, correct?
Yes, correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a couple were IEDs, one was a rocket, and they kind of just all, after I got home, a few years after, I had a seizure. I didn't know why, and they kind of related it to that. So
Luca's now your service dog?
Yes. Yep. He flies right on the plane with me wherever we go somewhere, and we take him everywhere.
Great. Okay, so what we do in our live seminars is we bring people up on stage to do demonstrations with.
Yes.
And I typically do not know anything about the person that we bring up because I just randomly pick somebody from the audience. Yeah. And I remember that my friend Kara, mutual friend Kara, she's like, I have someone who I think would be great. His name is Ray. That's all I knew. And so I call the name Ray. Yeah. And little did I know, but again, correct me if I'm wrong, weren't you about to leave, or weren't you trying to? You did leave.
We left. We went back to the hotel. I was just, I have a problem with, I got to keep moving, and just sitting in one spot makes you a little anxious. But I can train myself to stay. But the dog was acting up, so brought him to the hotel, and I was going to stay there with him. Because I was like, Chris, this is for you. You go do your thing, be with Kara, and get your health on. And then she got a call, Kara, or a text, said, "Are you guys coming back? Because we want to put Ray on stage." I'm like, what? So, and I've learned through, I had my problems when I got back from Iraq that I was in denial of needing help. It seemed like every weekend I was getting in a bar fight or getting arrested. And then finally, I believe it was my mother that said, you should get help. I think you're angry, or, you're resenting something, or, you have PTSD. And I was like, no, not me. That can't be me, so it turns out it was me. So I finally went to the VA, and I've been going there ever since, and I actually work there now. So, and tremendous help. I've been getting therapy on and off for 10 years, 12 years now. So,
for the
PTSD,
specifically for the PTSD with the wartime activity, correct? So if I could just dive into that a little bit more, the therapy and the all the different things that the VA has offered, which thank goodness there's stuff out there. Do you feel like there's still, even after all this time, there's still some stigma for the men in the service?
Of course. It's from when I started going to the VA, which was in, I believe, 2008, maybe. It's come a long way. Back then, they just saw someone like me, read my file. They said, wow, this kid's pretty messed up. And they would throw pills at me. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's only a Band-Aid. And it makes you feel different. And I didn't like the way I felt. So I went along with, the like CBT, cognitive brain therapy, or cognitive behavioral therapy, and then CPT, which is cognitive processing therapy, and other things too, like mindfulness and, grounding techniques, which they all helped. Mm-hmm. And as long as you stick with them, they'll continue to help. So that's what saved me, for the time being.
Right. And you had been doing that for, like you said, 10, 15 years, right? And yet, from my understanding, you were still waking up almost every night in the middle of the night.
Oh, yes. Yeah. The one thing I could not shake was the nightmare. It was like on a reel of, the same thing each night. And in the beginning, because the nightmares were so bad, I was only getting maybe 3 hours of sleep, which I still only get maybe 4, 5 if I'm lucky. but I'm okay with that. But in the beginning, they prescribe you things that sedate you. And sometimes everybody has different effects of medication. This one, I would sleepwalk. So I'd get up and I'd turn the shower on, leave the fridge door open, and I'd go back to bed. Thankfully I didn't light the stove or anything like that,
or go for a drive,
right.
Which I've heard people do.
Yeah. So that was bad. So yeah, I'm not, thankfully through all that therapy, I don't take any medication, for, my mental state of mind and whatnot. So that's, I'm totally in the clear now with that. So that's good.
That's amazing. And that's what I really wanted to talk to you and share your story with others, because this is a bit of a different take.
Different
because
approach,
usually the people we've had on here have had multiple sessions, or have come to retreats or something like that. And we're hearing about their progress and how, their life's been changed after all of these sessions or whatever they were doing with Mind Change. Still to this day, you've had a 40-minute experience done on stage at a live event. So, and yet through that, I have to say I've had a lot of people up on stage. I've seen a lot of great things, been able to experience a lot of great things. Your particular session that we did just on stage just was so impactful for me. And I know people are still talking about it. Anyone who was at that live event, still, we hear it on social media. Anyone follow up with Ray? How's Ray doing? Like, you really impacted quite a lot of people.
That was a big shock to me, because I haven't done that. Not like that in that capacity. I can remember. And when you had me and had my eyes closed and those last few words, and then I opened my eyes, I felt like this gigantic weight come off my chest and my shoulders, and I still remember to that day. And then all that, that euphoric feeling of, feeling stress-free kind of disappeared as soon as I looked to my left and I see a line of people waiting to greet me, shake my hand, hug me. I'm like, no, what is this?
There wasn't a dry eye in the house, I think, after we got done. But I think that's important, because when I spoke to you, I remember when we were talking, you had just, I believe, come out of a intensive.
Oh, oof, that was a rough one. That was probably the worst therapy I had to go through. And it's not for everybody. They even told me that. It was exposure therapy.
That's right, yeah.
That was intense. I would tell the therapist my story, my nightmare, over and over and over again, and record it. And then I'd have to do it again and again. And then on my off time, I have to listen to it and listen to it. And it was nonstop for weeks on end. And, I mean, they're not trying to desensitize you. They're trying to just make sure that it's not your fault, and stuff like that. Trying to help you deal with the facts and, expose you to what you're afraid of and make you realize that it's not happening now. It's in the past. Can't do anything about it anymore. So let's, try and move on. But a lot of people can't move on.
Right. Well, what I know about brain research and the way that happens is the more we tell a story, the more that it actually, in one sense, widens that neural pathway, makes it more travelable, makes it more, it deepens that neural pathway, which means even if we've now put a frame over the story, we're still subconsciously replaying this story over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
And our brain doesn't know the difference between happening now and happening then. Even if we can consciously say that was then, our body will still produce chemicals in alignment with what we're doing.
Yep.
So I met you pretty quickly after your exposure therapy. And yet for this same memory that we were going to work on, and it was still very alive and real.
Yeah, it was. It still is. I don't want to say have nightmares. I say I want to dream about it now. Because through that and through the session we had, which I'm so grateful for. I've learned, I'm at peace with it, and it's okay now, even though it's when you think about it, it still makes you sad. But you realize that it wasn't your fault, and you can't do anything about it now, and you have to just be at peace with it and just, own it. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm doing a great job at that now. I hope so.
Yeah. Well, I definitely saw a huge shift for you. And your wife mentioned, I think within a couple weeks later, and said that she had seen a big shift, very different than what she had seen before. So do you mind if we just, for the audience, a little peek into what it was? Because obviously there's many, many traumas.
Yeah.
War is a horrific place. A lot of stuff happens. And anyone who's never been a part of that, we've seen movies. It's very different, right? To have that happen live. And so trigger warning here for anybody who maybe has this kind of trauma. But if we could just maybe explain a little bit about what it is that we worked on when you came up. And again, I did not know. I didn't know your story. No. I didn't know what we were getting into.
Definitely wasn't scripted.
Yes. And had I probably wouldn't have called you up for what was supposed to be a, maybe 20, 25 minute thing. But I'm so glad I did, because it was so special to have happen what happened. So what is it that, from what you remember now, that we worked on?
Like a quick snapshot?
Sure.
Just like a recap of what I told you?
Recap.
All right. Let's see. I think I was a year. I think it was a year into Iraq. And I think it was Ramadi, and there was a base we were at, a fob. And right outside was the main road. Actually, I think it was like 6 lanes with a median in the middle, Jersey barriers. And we were coming back from a mission. So I think we were traveling north and with the traffic, and we were going to take a left into our base. And there was a lot of traffic that day of civilian vehicles and military vehicles. And we were in a convoy, and I was in front, and there was 3 other Humvees behind me, and then a couple of Abrams tanks. And just like any other day, we were coming back from a raid, and which was very successful. And we were traveling back to the base. We were going to take a left into the base, and all of a sudden we had to stop because there was the oncoming traffic and the other side, and they were just driving, and they were shooting at each other. What they have is like turf wars, and the Sheiks, the Shiites, the Sunnis, they don't like each other either, and they all hate Americans. So there we go. So, and then I remember being in front. I'm a driver. I'm driving in front, and directly in front of me, pulls right in front of me was, I believe it was a black BMW, 4-door black BMW. And it stopped, and we dismounted because there was a lot of firing going on. And we were taking shots. We were shooting back at the drive-by shooters. And I looked over to my left and a little bit, and saw the black BMW. It had a male driver with a female adult passenger, and there was a younger female child in the back. And then I turned my eyes to another car that was shooting at us. We shot back, and then I looked back at the BMW, and there was I didn't see the little girl in the back anymore. And there was a bullet hole through the rear window. So my instinct was that she got hit and she's in the back seat. So naturally I made sure it was safe, to go over there with cover fire, and it all happened so quick, and they wasn't far. The vehicle must have been 10, 15 feet away. I ran over to the rear right passenger door, and she was laying on her left side. But before that, before I approached the vehicle, I noticed that the male adult in the front, the driver, his door flung open, and I stopped for a quick second to make sure nothing was going to happen. And he fell out on the side of the road, holding his neck with blood squirting out. So I knew he was a goner. So I made my way to the other side, where it was a little less firing going on. I opened the door, and she wasn't moving. And I assumed it was the mother in the front seat because she was yelling and screaming. It looked safe to reach in because she didn't have a weapon. So I reach in, I pull the little girl by her ankles close toward me. And the nightmare, it was getting intense at that moment, because I remember, I don't remember seeing any or little blood. But she was very pretty. She must have been 8 years old. She had long black hair, and she was wearing this like terry cloth cotton long dress, purple, and just she was laying still there. So it was a split second. I grabbed her by the ankles, I pulled her out, and I cradled her to my chest. And as I held her for those brief moments, I noticed that there was blood in the back seat where she'd been laying, and now there was blood on me, and I saw that she was shot through the back and came out the other side, and that's what hit, I'm assuming, her father in the neck. So I'm holding her, and I can still to this day feel, her dress and the softness of it, and just seeing her very still. I noticed she wasn't breathing at all. I remember it too, because I was hoping that, with some hope that she would still be alive, but I kind of knew that wasn't happening. And at that moment, her mother exited the vehicle, and I could see her arms were, up in the air, and the only thing I could think to do was hand her over to her. And so I did. And then I got back to my vehicle. And that's a brief, picture of what has been playing in my mind over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. And thank you for sharing. And so some of the nuances to this that I've noticed from the first time I heard the story, and as we did some work on it there are details now that are more prominent. Yeah, please. That I think are, in one sense, sort of sweet and sort of special.
Yep.
That as we worked through the stuff, we made sure to notice, because the thing about trauma is however we're representing it most primarily, we will get very focused on a few things. Yep. Oftentimes blood is one of the primary focuses, or body positioning and stuff like that. And we sometimes miss a few of the other things. And the noticing of those things, the softness in the material of her dress, the color, I know those are things we a little bit more explored when we were deep in there subconsciously. And those things kind of bring you back, pulling away from the trauma and into the things that are a little bit more tangible, a little bit more neutral, if you will, that can be focused on. Yeah. So we worked through that and pulling some of those extra details. And then and again, what happens with trauma, one of the biggest things is the meaning we make out of it. Yeah. Right. And you were holding some personal responsibility for that, the fault idea, and, some other things about maybe what she was thinking or what she was feeling. And if you remember, what we had to do is to step into the little girl and what might have been going on with her and how she felt to be held, to be protected in that moment like that. And I know that was some profound shifts. Yeah. Does that stuff do you find that stuff, you can still access, or it still sticks with you? Yeah,
it definitely sticks with me. I don't know, even when I'm dreaming about it, I can still, and still smell the spent rounds, gunpowder, diesel, strong scent of diesel and exhaust, and that's pretty much all it smells like over there. And the color of her dress, and I guess the blood too. But over there, you see it every day. But yeah, just that, the vibrant colors, and the sounds and the smells. But yeah, it sticks. Everything reminds me of that moment.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're differentiating now a little bit between nightmare and dream.
Yeah.
And because in the beginning, the way it was presented, these were pretty horrific nightmares happening, reoccurring over and over and over again. And what we know is that's just the mind's way of saying there's unresolved stuff here. There's something that needs to be taken care of completely. And I want to stress again, we did 40 minutes of work in front of us on a stage in front of a lot of people.
Yeah, it was rough.
But you did so good. And as we, dove into that and shifted some stuff, even in such a short amount of time, I saw such a huge shift. Mm-hmm. Even the way you're repeating it back to me now is different than the way you initially repeated it back.
Because I'm not crying now?
Maybe that's it, yeah. Also, there's a little bit of halting in when you describe it, which is good because it means it's not as accessible as it was before.
Right.
Now, coming right out of immersion therapy, where you were rehearsing this over and over and over and over again, it's like a rote story, like you're just telling it. And I think that's part of what they're trying to do is get you to tell the story so many times. It's like, I'm just telling a story.
Right.
But your body, and the chemicals being produced in your mind in accordance to that memory that was happening over and over again was not serving you. So telling the story over and over and over again was no longer serving you.
I lost, because of that on-stage experience with you, I lost a lot of the bad moments of that little, piece in time, which is good. Because now like telling you this now, I was telling the story and I was more focused on her rather than all the bad stuff going around and that, the last moments of, peace that she has, or, something like that.
Yeah. One of the things I regret most is not having that session recorded. Yeah. We usually record that stuff, but we did not, nobody got any footage of what we did on stage. But as you were telling the story back, I was getting goosebumps of the details about her dress and about the color and about different things, because those were things missing in the beginning story. Yeah. And a lot was focused on all of the, still it was being spoken very rote, but there was a lot of details around the firing and the smells and the trauma of it, the negative of it. And so getting you in touch with, I think that's what was missing through the whole time is you've interacted with this girl so many times in that moment and then every day since that moment in your mind. Yep. And yet you never interacted with her.
Correct.
And that I think was the missing thing that needed to happen. You needed to connect with her.
Yes.
That she was a life, that she was a being, that something happened there. Yep. And also that you were there at such a, in one sense, beautiful time of her passing. Mm-hmm. That's a sacred time, and you shared that in that moment with her. And that's what was missing in a lot of ways. Now, all of that being said, 40 minutes on stage, we did what we could. There's still stuff there. If I could get my mitts on you for a couple more sessions, boy, we could just change all of that. And it would be really great. And that's, I think that's kind of what I wanted to bring you on especially for, because your story's amazing. The way you present yourself is amazing. You've done so much work. So you're so brave.
I have to, owe it to other people too that have not forced me to, but have suggested to do these things. And like the 40 minutes I got on stage, I was dragged by my wife to that, which I'm thankful it was. Also too, prior to exposure therapy, back in when we were living back in Massachusetts, I wasn't prepared for the first time I ever saw a medium. Mm-hmm. She dragged me to that. very skeptical at first, but then it kind of blew my mind. The things these people know.
Yeah.
And the things she said about the little girl, I've never written about it or posted anything about it. And it was mind blowing. And along with that, and I think the final stress relief was being on stage with you. And that completed a lot of, what I was always questioning and thinking about, and, why this, why that. And it makes you, not that you have the answers to it, but it makes you look at it a different light. It makes you, it doesn't beat yourself up for it. It makes you accept it and see the goodness that came out of it, or what can come out of it. So I definitely look at it differently now.
And that's part of what we do is just as get in there to the subconscious mind, because so many things are stored that we're not aware of.
Negatively too.
Yeah. But also it's hard to say there's anything necessarily positive about that experience.
No, that, yes.
But
doesn't sound like a happy ending either.
No, it's not a happy ending. But there are things that we sometimes just coming out away from the intensity of it, coming out and having some perspective just allows you, like when we got you in touch with the texture of her dress or the color of her dress and some of those moments, what that does for the mind is it expands it to other possibilities. There might be more that I missed, which what we got in touch with is maybe you were there and you really helped in that moment. And in that moment, this little girl was held strongly by someone who cared for her and cared for her family and risked his own life, to be in that moment with her. What about that? What about that perspective of it? So rather than it being your fault or you didn't do something, which we know, of course, there's nothing you could have done in that situation that would have prevented that, but you still went ahead and went forward. So rather than it being your fault or something even negative that you did something actually quite heroic and quite beautiful. And that's hard to see.
Very hard to see.
If you're focused on all of the other stuff. So just that expansion, it's amazing the way the brain works. Expanding into a few more details, colors, textures, smells, sights, and sounds that are just one layer outside of the trauma can sometimes break free those other perspectives.
Right.
And that's you, again, you were so brave to be up there doing something you had no idea about and were skeptical about. And also I think you were like, I don't really want to be here. And you did it anyway. And it was amazing. And there were numerous veterans in the audience and family members of veterans.
I remember that,
And I cannot even tell you what hope that gave them and the light that shone in for their own possibility, because a lot of these people have been through years and years and years and years and years of therapy and are still cycling some of these horrific things in their mind on the daily. So the fact that you're now dreaming rather than nightmaring after 40 minutes on stage just gives me so much hope that there's, what if we would have done a 2-hour deep intensive session?
Oh boy.
I know it sounds like it's a little different than when we're doing it up on stage, but there's hope for this stuff to be really, really different and really changed.
It felt different. Even though when I first got up on that stage, I didn't know what I was in for. And as soon as I sat down, I wanted to get up and leave. And I remember in the beginning, I'm like, just telling the story. I'm like, this is brutal. I know I'm going to cry. Don't do it, Ray. And, but in the end, it became like, I want to say like tears of relief and joy rather than sadness and pain. So it felt good.
Yeah.
And it also helped to know that the audience was with me for a while. I could hear them. Oh, when I couldn't see anybody because I had my eyes closed, and I know I try to crack a joke or two in there just to alleviate some of my, or mask my sadness. But, cause that's all I feel like I do all the time is wear a mask sometimes, just smile and everything's all right. But, deep down inside, it's not. And it's how a lot of people live their lives.
Yeah.
It's how I did for a long time.
And we should have more resources. We
Yeah.
should have more availability for people. And I do think, people are doing the best they can. The VA is doing the best they can with the therapies and stuff. And there's so many different things. I know they're starting to open up some of the psychedelics and stuff like that. And,
Yeah, I got asked to do that. But I live here now. So Boston called me, Boston VA, and asked, sent me a letter and wanted to know if wanted to try some new LSD trials or something like that. And I'm like, no, I tried it before. I don't know if I want to try it again.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people use those things as masking agents and as coping
in a controlled
mechanisms.
environment, that is.
Right. So I think there's, but we need to do better. That's the thing that I've always felt is we need to do better.
I think they have come a long way since when I first got out of the military. There is a great VA set up here in Charleston, where I'm from, Boston VA. They've helped me out tremendously, and they are getting better and better, but they're super swamped with people and workloads, cases, and it's very overwhelming, and everybody's understaffed. So
yeah, well, we have a huge vision for training people up to be able to do this work. I mean, if you think about what we were able to do in 40 minutes with no background knowledge, think about what we could do with some really targeted, times with people. I think there's a lot of hope for that. So that's another thing, is that we can get into the deepest of deep stuff. And, because we don't let people stay in it, we pull them out of it. And that's part of the magic of it, is that the in and out of it, really putting people in.
You call it magic, I call it pain.
Yes. It can feel painful because you're reliving something again, but for such a short amount of time, right? Yeah. You've been doing this for 15 years, and in just immersion therapy daily, getting deep into the story, where if we can put someone in deep in the story for a few minutes, but to get out of it, what you left with was with that different perspective, in touch with that little girl now in a different way, that, like you mentioned, that weight lifted off of your chest finally after all of these years, then I'd say a little bit of that pain, if you will, is worth it.
And if you said, would you ever do it again? Of course I would. And it would be painful, but I know that what the outcome would be. It's just like people ask me all the time, would you ever go back to Iraq? And I also say, yeah, in a heartbeat. I don't know, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment or something. I have no idea. But it gives you a sense of you're a part of something, and that's bigger than you. And some people say it's right, some people say it's wrong, but I do think I have a decent moral compass. So when that happened to me on that day with the little girl, I tried everything I could, and I lived with it for so many years, saying I wasn't quick enough, wasn't fast enough. What if I did this? What if I went this way instead of that way? And that's what, kept the nightmares playing, until I did all this therapy through the VA and with other people, and with you at the end. It definitely helped out, and I want to thank you for it.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm like, what if we could have done that with you right after? What if we
right
could
after
have,
I got home?
Right after you got home, right? Like, wouldn't it be so great if people didn't have to, replay that stuff for so many years?
I think I was still a little more brainwashed than normal right after I get home. So
right, yeah, it's a little fresh. Well, the beauty of that is when we're purely working off of the biology and the mechanics of the way the brain works, someone doesn't even have to necessarily be consciously ready. Where we can just, we can do the things that we know that need to be done, and it really sets the trajectory of healing up so much faster.
It might have changed a lot of things. I don't know. Like you said, it was still, when I got home, I wanted to go 100 miles an hour still, just run through walls. And I don't know if I could actually, it probably would have taken a while to let it sit in and, take all that information and all that therapy in the beginning.
Well, right, replaying that kind of stuff and doing what you did, the amount of adrenaline, the amount of, for you to have to keep going with carrying this load of stuff.
Oh, it's heavy. Yeah.
It's so heavy. And so you almost need more and more adrenaline, more of those stress hormones kicking up so that you don't sit and look at that stuff. And that's part of what brings people home and gets them into more trouble because they seek that rush of adrenaline. So they get into fights and they create these things without even realizing why. Because if they see a dip in the adrenaline,
they won't.
Then they're going to have to maybe deal with that pack on their back. And that feels really, really overwhelming and scary.
Yeah, and you don't want to admit that you've lost control and seek help. So that's why a lot of people don't.
Yeah. So if there were someone, if this happens to cross someone's path who hasn't dealt with it yet, who maybe is still running through walls or running or coping in some way because they don't feel like maybe they need help or they're afraid to ask or they don't want to go through it again. That's a lot. And they're like, I don't want to go through it again.
Right.
Without realizing they're going through it every
day.
Single day. What would you say to that person?
I would say that it's going to be a long, painful road if you don't accept it and seek help and want to change. Because it was a painful road for me because I said it wasn't me. Nope, that's not me. I don't need help. I can get through it on my own. And when you finally realize you have a problem or an issue or with the trauma that you've been through, and you say, I can do this on my own, and you try to white knuckle it, it's only going to blow up in your face. It usually backfires when you try to do that. And I'm a believer of that, everybody needs somebody to help them or guide them in the right direction. But then again, there are people that don't want to change, and you can't help somebody that doesn't want to change. So you're only burning up your own energy. But some people never give up on somebody, and they end up giving in and they change their lives. So I know my family never gave up on me, and my wife now, she's my rock. And yeah, I get in these moments where it gets a little hectic, and I got to take a time out, like maybe mostly a crowded Walmart or something like that.
And that's scary for almost anybody these days, but no, I get yeah.
I try to avoid that. Crowded places, loud things, loud noises. But it's good to, like you said, expose yourself to these things once in a while, just so that you do feel that, you're what happened to you before, and that's why I like, doing some of these therapies on my own and replaying that story in my mind. But then again, everything that in everyday experiences throughout, doing anything, there's always going to be something that reminds you of what happened, no matter what you do, and you can't help it. So you just got to accept it, ground yourself, cope with it, think about the experiences that like I had with you and other therapy sessions, and just move on. I don't hold anything in anymore because that's a bad idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It finds a way out.
It does.
And then I feel like it adds trauma.
Yeah.
Then you have issues with your family, or you may get in trouble with the law, or you may, if you have children, that you pass these things down without trying, and it needs to get stopped.
Yeah.
And there needs to be a way to do it.
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we've helped so many people overcome to where, there's that saying that healing isn't just avoiding triggers. Mm-hmm. Healing is where you pull that trigger and you can't get the same response anymore.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're after, is not trying to get people to cope and not just getting people coping mechanisms, but get in and change the wiring in their brain so that you can flick that trigger all you want and it doesn't, doesn't give you the same response.
And that's different than saying, people, like, I used to say, oh, I have an outlet. I go to the gym, or I do this, or I play sports. That's just an outlet for what is like really heavy on you is causing stress, not the root of the problem.
Right.
You're only treating the symptoms of PTSD. Say, like, I go running, or I lift weights, or I go fishing. Or you could have other more destructive habits like drinking or gambling. And that's just, you're not getting to the root of the cause of the problem. And I really think that, it's, the situation that I was thrown into with you, that definitely helped the root of the problem.
Wow. I'm just so grateful that your wife drug you and that you were, it did take you agreeing to get up there. We don't drag anyone up on a stage.
No.
So,
but you got to want to try and do new things.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for other people, I probably wouldn't try and do other things. Cause I'm a man of routine and I try to stick with what's, familiar. But yeah, it's good to, try new things, especially when it comes to therapy and things that people say, oh, this might help you.
Yeah.
And you think, no, it won't help me. But everything that my wife has said, this may help you, and it has. So
yeah. Something, because again, I just met you for that, 40 minutes, and I didn't really know you before that. What were you like before you went into the service?
Oh God, I don't hear it enough from my mother. Love her. But she'll always tell, like, my wife or someone else or anybody that, doesn't really know me from before, like, oh, Raymond was so different back then. He was always smiling and funnier and carefree and loved life. I'm like, that sounds like a daytime soap opera. What are you talking about, Ma? Or a Hallmark movie. I'm like, are you sure that was me? Like, and then, it's funny because when you go in a certain trauma, in a certain situation where you're immersed in an environment like that, like say war, and every day is basically a fight for your life. And it's a little different than say, and I'm not telling anybody that PTSD is better than anybody else's, but like, I've been in car accidents that last seconds, and some people may not get over them, but some people do. And this was way different for me. I don't, because of this event, I don't remember what I was like before it. I really don't.
Mm-hmm. No, that happens.
Like my mom will say, remember when you did this? I go, no, I have no clue.
Right.
Could be also the brain injury, but I have no idea. But I'm just saying that I don't recall being the kind of person that people tell me I used to be.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, knowing in the research and everything that I've seen, when the amount of survival mechanisms that need to come into play, because we're talking about actual life and death survival, but not for short amounts of time. I mean, you were there for 2 years of every day, probably, in one sense, fighting for your life. Because even in down times, you never know when you're going to be attacked. So you can never really fully allow yourself relaxation. That triggers mechanisms that should not happen. And to do that, what that means in your brain, it is resourcing everything possible just for survival. So it takes up a lot of that space. So it really does make sense.
It's exhausting too.
Yes, it's exhausting. So the good news about that for you and for others is it is recoverable. It is, but we have to turn off all of those mechanisms of safety and survival that were turned on and left on for so long. It's almost like, excuse me for any of you out there who are like science and neuroscience nerds, because this is layman's terms, but it's like fuses were blown. And until those fuses go back and they're rehooked up to light up the right areas of the brain, it makes complete sense. But there is hope.
Oh, is there?
There is hope. Yes, to recover those memories and allow your brain to go back to those things without it being a survival mechanism. Because it doesn't make sense for your brain to be in kind of a constant state of survival or recovery, and to think back of, I was this happy-go-lucky. There's almost not enough space for that, because then you're going to mourn how you've gotten to where you are.
Yeah.
So I don't think right now it's safe enough for your brain to do that. But the more that trauma is healed, and the more that wiring is done, and the more that actually the nervous system is allowed to stay in more long period states of rest and digest and relaxation, then those areas of the brain will start to light up. It was with me in a very different, mine was physical and sexual abuse. And so for a long part of my childhood. And so for me too, it took quite a long time for me to access memories of my childhood that weren't traumatic.
Right.
And who I was before. It was a whole different thing. When that happened, I didn't expect that to happen. But when I was doing this work for long enough and that started to happen, I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like my whole childhood came back to me in
amazing.
Good things.
Yeah.
And that just gives me more resource to be who I want to be in the future when I can remember who I was in the past. So it's there. It's there. It doesn't necessarily happen in a 40-minute on stage thing, but it's there.
Yeah.
And I think even though the 40 minutes on stage shows us that even in a situation like that in front of hundreds of people and with no real investment in what we're doing and a little bit of resistance even, you went ahead and had these really deep changes that are still lasting today.
Yeah.
And this was, when was that? Months and months ago. Last year.
Yep.
So just from that short amount of time, I feel
Last summer, I think.
Yeah, I feel like that gives me hope. It gives other people hope that we can do better. We can get in there and do more.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like ponder all the time, like, oh, what was I really like before I joined the Army? Because I don't know, it doesn't feel that important to me. I mean, if I do start someday to remember that, that's fine. But the way my mom talks, how I was back before I joined the military, I don't think I want to be that person because she makes me sound like a wimp or something like that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, I don't remember that.
I'm like trying not to go into session mode right now. Makes sense. We call that a secondary gain. But yes, I see that connection. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But of course, this is mom's process too.
I know.
Right? Mom's in since mourning and she feels she doesn't want to see you the way that you've.
Yeah, because, you know, she saw, you know, what I was like when I first got back. And it was a totally changed person. And because she didn't see me for years. And, you know, she didn't hear when I first went over there because there were no phones. There was no mail set up. So she thought I was not alive for months. And I know what she went through. She still suffers from it today. And but I've made, even she said she's seen tremendous strides in my improvement of, you know, dealing with my stressors and the trauma. And I truly believe that she's happy for me now.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you. Thank you for talking about this. I love this. It's a bit of a different perspective and how we're approaching it and everything. And also, I do still think so important for people with these kind of what we would call capital T traumas, like very big T traumas. That's just something, in one sense, thankfully, very few of the population are ever going to have to deal with something to that degree.
Yes.
But too many people do still. And for those who do, again, we need to do better. We need to give people more options for true, full, lasting healing because you served your time. You don't need to keep serving it.
No,
you did it. You did plenty, more than enough. And it's time to, I think, move past all of that stuff. Yeah. So thank you for sharing your story. I really do believe it's going to impact somebody out there. And
I hope it does.
Yeah, I know it will because it already has. Like, you're one of the most top people I get asked about.
Really?
And it was only a short, a small amount. No. People are like, Ray. I know anyone, we're going to have to send out a newsletter just to the people who came to that seminar to say, hey, make sure you watch the podcast with Ray as we follow up because you made it.
I do remember everybody though.
Yeah. Really. And again, because there were many veterans in the audience. And so it got the wheels turning on how we can use mind change and figure out a way to, help more people understand and know mind change so that we can help more people. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Any last little words you want to say to anyone out there who might be listening?
I just want to say Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening to my story. And I wish everybody well.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Ray. And thank you all for joining us again on the Mind Change podcast. If you are getting any value from what you're seeing, watching, hearing, please go ahead and subscribe, leave us those 5-star reviews. They're so helpful in whatever algorithm universe is out there. And it really helps us to continue to do things like this, travel, and speak to the guests that we really feel like are going to speak to you. So thanks for joining us as we endeavor to change the world one mind at a time.